Before we jump into this, I would like to highlight the challenges with measuring innovation. And it actually lies in us humans and our attitude toward change. And I brought 4 examples here of some interesting reactions to new innovations. So first we have the telephone. It has too many shortcomings to be seriously considered as a means of communication. How many have a phone in their pocket right now? It was a while ago, though. But I like to be a bit nostalgic. Television won't be able to hold on to any market it captures after the first 6 months. People will soon get tired of staring at the plywood box every night. We're still staring at that box, or most of us at least, every night. Remote shopping, while entirely feasible, will flop. The 2 of the most valuable companies in the world right now is Amazon and Alibaba, doing exactly that. And the last one, there's no chance that the iPhone is going to get any significant market share. So we need to be a bit careful with our own attitudes to change, and we can address that with metrics and having a structured way of working with exploration and the unknown. So before we go into this, there's a couple of things we need to have in place. So you know why the best are the best? It's because they're always learning. Even Spider-Man is learning. And the goal is never to be the best, it's to keep being curious, to keep creating, keep driving positive change. So the key insight here first is that innovation is fundamentally different way of working than your already existing structures. And I think that we've kind of already established that truth. But that's the first thing that we need to acknowledge. When we're working with new turf, we need to work with other type of methods, with other type of governance structures. The second thing is that we need to have a common language. If you look at the world today, who's excelling is those with a structured way of communicating. So we have computers speaking to each other with programming languages. It's going quite well for them. We'll see if they race past us humans. And the most positive research says that we will have superintelligence in 2050 or around there. And the ones that are a bit more careful say that it might be a couple of 100 years or potentially never. And then, of course, we have humans who have plenty of different languages to communicate, and it's working quite well. So we need this for innovation as well, because as we all know, it's a buzzword, and it can mean many different things. And they kind of you start with innovation, and you keep adding on lean startup methodologies, and you start adding on design thinking, you start adding on disruptive and radical, and you can build quite a big mountain with this. So the third thing is an innovation strategy. And I'm very glad that we get a little bit of a deep dive into the methodologies and the different steps you need to go through to set an innovation strategy, because this one is very high level, but we don't have that much time. So, I mean, most organizations have a vision or a purpose or a mission, a reason for existing, and they often have a corporate strategy in different pillars. You can call them focus areas, teams, or something else. But what we want to do is we want to break out strategic initiatives that are important to learn more about. So I often use the metaphor that the corporate strategy is like a big tanker. It's like a big ship. And the innovation strategy is the small speedboats that go in front and learn where to go, because the other one is slower to navigate. So this component is really, really important, because if we don't have an innovation strategy, we don't know how to organize our metrics, because the innovation strategy is kind of for the skeleton, the foundation in how we create that model. We also need a balanced innovation portfolio, because if we don't spend or spread our resources, time, and energy, it will be very hard for us to innovate. So I'm sure many of you are familiar with the Free Horizon model, but basically it's a way to make sure that you don't spend all your focus and time on the here and now. So we do want to spend some time in the core business, but we also want to spend time in Horizon 2 with growth business, making what we have better through incremental innovation, but also creating landing strips for what we find in Horizon 3, the speedboats that are very, very far out. Because here it's mainly about learning. It's higher risk, but potentially also higher return of investment, because we know that what we learn in Horizon 3 will most likely be tomorrow's core business is on Horizon 1. What timeline that is, of course, depends on the context, the industry, and parameters that are often out of our control. But we can definitely risk minimize by thinking on a longer time horizon. And the last component, the biggest one that we need to be aware of before we start designing our system for metrics, is our innovation management system. So at Innovation 360, we assess innovation capabilities through a framework that I will talk more about in a minute. Through this assessment, we have managed to gather quite a lot of data. So we have over 1,000 organizations' data from 60 countries. And in this data, we can see quite interesting patterns on what needs to be in place to succeed with continuously innovating, making innovation a habit. And it's these 3 pillars. So you need a structured governance model with roles and responsibilities. You need to make sure that someone is accountable for driving the exploration work in the right direction, and that someone is driving the innovation process. We also need an innovation process, and the key role of an innovation process is really to gather the insights, creativity, and ideas of all our employees, our ecosystem, and translate that into value, and do it in the right way at the right time, which is not the easiest. And then we need an organization to support this with leadership for different time horizons. We need a culture of innovation, and we need tools and infrastructure to make this scalable. I won't go into more detail about this now, but let's keep these 4 things in mind. So a common language, an innovation strategy, a balanced portfolio, and an innovation management system. Since we only have 20 minutes, we're moving fast into innovation metrics. It's easy to kind of get stuck, and we've seen this, and we walked in this trap with a lot of organizations we work with, that you only start looking at the operational metrics because they are easy. Number of ideas, number of experiments, number of prototypes, but having many ideas might not actually be necessarily a good thing, depending on how you designed your innovation strategy. So what we've done is we divided the innovation metrics into 3 different categories: strategic, tactical, and operational. And I mean, this is nothing new under the sun. So what we do is we go through a lot of activities, and through those activities, we collect the data that we can then organize into different metrics. So if we start with the strategical innovation metrics, there's really 2 questions that we need to ask ourselves here. The first one is if we have the right aspiration to deliver on our strategic initiatives, on our innovation strategy. Are we thinking big enough? Are we thinking long-term enough? Are we taking in everything that's happening in the world and being realistic about our strengths and how to meet this? And then we need to check, do we have the ability to deliver on those strategic initiatives? So I mean, aspiration and ability, they're kind of counterparts. This is often set by a leadership team or even a board of directors, and typically measured every 6 to 12 months, maybe even on a longer time frame. Then we have tactical metrics, and this is about systematically working with our strategic initiatives on the short, mid, and long term, so across this balanced portfolio of horizons. We, of course, also need to have defined metrics to measure the changes, the derivations, and the results that we're producing. This is typically set by an innovation board, a steering group, or a leadership team, or in combination. And this we measure on a little bit of a higher frequency, so potentially 1 to 3 months cadence. And then we have the operational metrics. So this is really how we utilize our organization and resources in an optimal way to deliver on the strategic initiatives. So you can see they're all tying back to the innovation strategy, and that's why that becomes such an important first step in kind of designing your metric systems. And this is measured by innovation task force, but reporting into an innovation board. And you can measure progress even daily or every week. So I was thinking we take a little closer look, because of course there's more to this, starting with strategic metrics. So how do you measure strategic innovation? Of course, there's many ways of doing this. What we have done at Innovation 360 is that we went through the past 100 years of research within the field of innovation management. We figure we don't need to go further back than 100 years. And we looked at what is the research saying, and how can we aggregate into something that is more digestible, that we can use to support the organization. And we landed in these 3 key questions, and then 3 pillars. So why do you want to innovate as an organization? What type of innovation do you want to do? And how are you planning to do it? Where you see the two first pillars is aspiration, and the second one is ability. So if we look at why you want to innovate, the strategic question for a profit-driving organization is often profit or growth. If you work for a non-profit, it could be any other type of higher purpose connected to UN's global development goals or something similar. Then we need to pick what type of direction do we want to go. Do we want to do this in incremental, smaller step? This is safer, lower risk, but we won't get potentially the same hockey stick effect. Or do we want to do it in radical steps, or both? Then we need to look at what type of approach do we want to take here. And we look at 3 different approaches that cover quite a broad range. So as an organization, you can be a need seeker, which means that you're very good at looking at your current and future customers' needs and let that be the input for the innovation process. Or you're a market reader, which means that you're very good at scanning the market, seeing what happens, looking at your competitors, looking at trends. This can be very effective, but it can be hard to move from incremental innovation since you're quite reactive. Or you could be a technology driver, which is typically organizations that invest heavily in R&D and let technological development set the innovation agenda. And of course, you can be a combination. We've seen in our data that if you want to work with radical innovation, it's good to try and combine being a technology driver with a need seeker, to take new technology and map it to unmet needs. So that's painting the bigger picture. What type of innovation is mainly there to broaden our view of what innovation is? If you are, for example, a product company, you often think that product innovation is what you have to stick to, but the most promising ideas is potentially some that span many categories of innovation: business model, process, service, or whatever it might be. And here, if you articulate it, you also get more interesting ideations because you think bigger. When we look at how you innovate, the leadership styles are extremely important because we know that leadership forms the culture, sets the goals, and basically manage the resources. So we look at 5 different types of leadership styles, and they're actually mapped and being suitable to different time horizons. Where cauldron is a leadership style where you frequently challenge your own business model. It can be quite annoying working with leaders that are constantly challenging everything that the organization is doing, but it can also be very useful. Then we have spiral staircase, which is performance management driven, exactly like it sounds. You have a project plan, you have a budget, you have a timeline, you have KPIs, and you execute. So very, very effective for Horizon 1 and executing on projects. Fertile field is the gardener. You have a lot of seeds, and you water the plants, and you see which one becomes a nice flower. So typically incubator leadership, where we don't judge too early. We'll give ideas and people time to explore. Also very good for Horizon 2 when we're looking for new opportunities. Then we have Pac-Man, which are leaders that are very good at working with their ecosystem. If you don't innovate yourself, you buy, like a Pac-Man or partner. Also good for Horizon 2. And then we have Explorer, which is exactly like it sounds. So very suitable for Horizon 3. Often don't fit very well into existing organizational structure where incentive models and career ladders are built for the spiral staircase type of leadership. And that's one of the reasons why it's so hard with radical innovation. Then we look at aspects. I won't go into this, but we look at 66 capabilities aggregated in 16 aspects that are important if you want to succeed with innovation. And we map them towards what you said in the why. So you don't need all 66. You need some of them depending on what your goals are. Very different if you want to work with incremental innovations versus radical innovation, for example. And then we look at personas, and here we use IDEO's framework, 10 phases of innovation, to get the right type of mix in innovation teams. And last but not least, we look at the innovation process and the different phases. So these give you a holistic view very connected to the innovation system I showed. So on a strategic level, we can see, does the organization as a whole become better at this? Are we actually evolving our leadership within innovation? Are we actually building the capabilities that we want to deliver on our aspiration? And this we can visualize in a dashboard. This is just an example how it could look like. So when we measure this, we actually send out a questionnaire and we aggregate the data. We can do benchmark towards countries or industries or similar to also get the grip of how do we play against our competitors or against the best in the world. What's also very wise to do is decide on a strategic level how you want to split your resources in the horizons. Do we want to spend a lot on the here and now, or do we want to move some and spend more in the future? So this is just an example where they define their horizons as Horizon 1 being 1 year, Horizon 2 being 1 to 3 years out, and Horizon 3 being 3 to 5 years out, and a 70-20-10 split. The Innovation IQ is an aggregated score that looks at all these different lenses and aspects and aggregates it. So it could be your like one KPI that you measure every year to see if you get better. A quick look at the tactical innovation metrics. The overall goal here is to manage the innovation portfolio in the first and second horizon. And I added some example metrics. Obviously, you probably don't have all of this because we don't want to measure ourselves to death, but I think it's really important to figure out what is important for us to measure to make sure that we are on the right track. And as we mentioned in the intro, responsible here is often innovation board, and measure this we often do every 1 to 3 months. A structured operational innovation metrics. I woke up at 4 a.m. this morning because I came from Germany, so I'm a little bit tired. Operational innovation metrics. Overall goal here is to manage the operation at each step of the innovation process. So going through ideation, collecting and organizing ideas, going through selection, testing ideas with hypotheses and experiments, building prototypes, doing interviews, being out collecting the data, going through development, and finally commercialization. And here again is just some example metrics to give you some inspiration on what this could look like and who's responsible and the cadence. There are several different thinkers and models out there right now how you could organize these metrics to put them in kind of different buckets. And I summarized 3 that we've been working with a little bit. So looking at these example metrics for both tactical and operational, you can divide them in, for example, impact metrics and activity metrics, where activity metric is the early phase, where you do lots of activities, and you actually need the activities to then later receive the impact metrics, which is more connected to the financial part. You can also divide it into behavioral metrics, customer impact metrics, and financial metrics. Or you can look at the upcoming ISO standard for innovation management that will be released in, I think, August 2019, but don't take my word for it, but it's sometime next year. And what they look at is input-related indicators, so early in the process, and then throughput-related indicators, and then finally output-related indicators. So quite similar to the impact activity metric, mapping them throughout the process. As some inspiration, I brought with me 2 examples of how we kind of used this foundation and mapped it to 2 cases. So this is an example of a company that we call it Innovation Accounting, and they've used Eric Rice's model with behavior change, customer impact, and financial impact. But they also divided into activity and impact metrics and seen how they move across the horizons. So that's one way you can solve it. Another way is to do a very strict mapping with your innovation strategy at the top per horizon, looking at the main return of investment per horizon, where here we say that in Horizon 1 it's profit and growth, makes sense. In Horizon 2 it's data, and in Horizon 3 it's pure learnings. And again, having a divide between activity type of metrics and impact type of metrics. And then they also put how much investment they want to give in each horizon. So, based on the structure and metrics that we outlined here today, I think it's really important to go back to the drawing board to define what type of KPIs do I want or do we need to track to move forward, and put them in a model connected to your innovation strategy, because only then it's actually worth for us to measure it. If you're interested to learn more about the strategic innovation metrics, I think that there are a couple of spots left to a session that we're doing tomorrow afternoon on this. So you're more than welcome to join if you want to learn more about how to assess strategic innovation metrics. And with that, I would like to thank you so much.